To order, please. Can you take attendance, please, Jackie?
Yes, all board members are present except for Mr. Payne.
Can we rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I don't have a whole lot of opening remarks to say tonight, except that since our last gathering, we had some wonderful graduation ceremonies and some wonderful celebrations across the district. We had a great day for our graduation at Meadowbrook. It was cool and comfortable and no rain or tornadoes. It was all good. And we also had a wonderful retirement celebration last week for some excellent, wonderful retirees who we will miss sorely and look forward to some fresh new faces before too long. So I'm happy that we are all back together again. We got some great stuff to cover tonight. And with that, I will ask Dr. Glass, what you'd like to say.
Sure, just a few announcements and things to kind of feel really good about as we end up this school year. First of all, I just want to thank our community, all of our staff members, our families, our students on our board, and all those who work together to make a great school district what it is, a great school district, and to make things happen, to make things work together and flow. And as a community, I think we are doing really well on our educational mission for our students. And thank you to everybody who makes that happen, because it doesn't happen with just one group of people committing themselves. It happens best when we all commit ourselves, and this community does commit itself fully to the mission of our educating our students to the highest levels. Yes, commencement was really exciting. I think one of the things that struck me was the students who spoke and gave addresses, and how well they've internalized the cornerstones of our high school, the mission of our district. You know, when you set out to design these things, you don't always know whether or not students are going to have a meta awareness about what's going on around them and what we're planning for them. Sometimes it can just, they can get lost in the day-to-day experience and maybe not see that. But you could see threads in everything that they said, that they really feel those cornerstones of our high school and the mission and vision and values of our school district resonate with them. And they articulated it beautifully, very proud of them. And two particular retirements. I know we did, as you mentioned, Cynthia, we had a wonderful retirement ceremony. We're going to miss all of our retirees tremendously, and we thank them all for their contributions. I just want to call out on a couple that I get to work with a little more closely based on their role. One is Tommy Gersh, who's been at our Wing Lake school now for many years, leading that school, has built the most wonderful school, the most wonderful culture. And she's moving on, and we're so thrilled. And for her, not thrilled that she's moving on, that sounded bad. We're thrilled for her and what she's going to get to do, and we're thrilled for everything she gave us for all those years, and we wish her all the best. And then Pam Schomer, our Director of Special Education, who likewise is retiring and has served us beautifully and really elevated our special education services and brought that team together to do wonderful things. We had a great DARE meeting in this room this week. It was probably one of our for me, it was just one of my one of the most inspirational meetings that we had. We had a great turnout. We celebrated with some food. We looked at some of those video presentations that the students had given at commencement, and we got to just talk about the pride of community and all the potential that we have in front of us. And we got to have Margaret Schultz, who's going to be leading our social emotional learning and equity and inclusion work going forward, and she was there and asked some great probing questions that surfaced some great thoughts. So very, very excited about what we're going to do, and we've got some things already planned for next year that are going to be a lot of fun, and they're going to create a lot of meaning for our community. I had the chance this week to go to Ann Arbor to the Michigan Design Prize Awards. We had two students of ours, first time they've entered. This competition's been going on for 3 years. It's put on to try to grow the talent base in Michigan and to provide designers and engineers a place to flourish and to compete. And the big design challenge was to create something that would enhance the joy and the experience for those in Michigan parks, and they had the whole year to design some ways to do that. We had two of our students do very well. I want to congratulate Blake Prebe, who took silver for that competition. He had a brilliant design that he animated and put together. And then also Noah Kelman, who had honorable mention. So this was a big deal. I mean, the governor had given an opening video to it, and just a beautiful event. Did some team building at the farm this week with our staff. I had no idea, even as a community gardener, what is the extent of the ropes course and team building kind of activities that exist within the woods at the center of the farm. It is just remarkable, and the programming really helped our team to function, and our whole central office team went for 3 hours the other day, and we really bonded in a special way. But all of the activities, as you would expect, really helped you see how you can interact and think differently about things and really change your mindset. It was really great. So I want to thank Alan and our farm crew there who put that on. This week, something very important in Michigan's educational history happened. Something was launched this week, and they call it Launch Michigan. This was a partnership of business leaders, labor unions, state leaders, education leaders, and philanthropists who have come together to say, we've tried a lot of things in education, but an educational system that's strong is important for Michigan, and we've tried a lot of things. We can do better, and we are committed for the long haul to trying to find some actionable steps to really take that to make these things happen with the new leadership that we expect to be, after this election cycle. I think this is something that I've been hoping for, and no one person or no one group can make this happen. It takes a commitment of a lot of groups working together to get this to happen, and you're seeing it happen. And I have to say it all started with the work of the Michigan School Finance Collaborative that this board supported and this county helped lead the work for. And I want to give a special shout out to Bob Moore, the CFO for Oakland Schools, who understood the work that needed to be done, got the right players around the table, and got that work started. And also want to congratulate him because he was awarded just this week the ASBO, American Society of Business Officials, correct? Is that what that stands for? Okay, thank you. Looking at Tina. These acronyms, sometimes you forget what they stand for. The ASBO International Distinguished Eagle Award. So in other words, like National Superintendent of the Year Award, right? That's Bob for the business officials. Internationally, really. So you talk about best in class kind of leadership we have in this county. It's amazing. So congratulations to him. I want to thank him, but I also want to just thank you as a board for supporting that work. And I think it's important that we all understand when you hear the term Launch Michigan, it's important that we not lose this momentum. We want to keep this momentum going forward because this is the group. This is a broad-based group that has the power to help make sure we get not just the right funding, but to get some priorities on the agenda and get them moving forward to improve education in the state, because it is critical for all of our futures here in the state. I have to congratulate 2 of our board members who were awarded last night some very prestigious awards. President Cynthia Von Oyen was given by the Michigan School Board Association their highest award, and there were only 9 of these awards given out statewide this year, if I'm understanding that correctly, and that is the President's Award of Recognition. It is a tremendous achievement. She's got the got the loot, and she was also recognized for 20 years of board service by our County School Board Association. This is a tremendous achievement. And also, Mr. Barron was awarded the Master Diamond Award by Michigan School Boards Association. And that, to earn that award, he had to pass and complete 14 200-level courses. That's a real commitment of time and learning and effort. So I want to applaud you both. I really take pride in the fact that all of our board members participate in these courses. They do their homework. They learn. You all do, and we're very, very pleased because that's part of good boardsmanship is having the right training and that ongoing learning that helps you to do your best work. One other celebration and then one other quick mention. One of our former team leaders here, Dr. Heidi Katula, who was a principal at Andover, principal at West Hills, and a director of learning services for us, who then left us to go to the Oakland Intermediate School District to become, she got a really long title there, but she was essentially one of the top leaders for curriculum and instruction throughout the county, and did a masterful job there. We hated to lose her here. She is now the superintendent of the East Grand Rapids schools, and we're so proud of her. I'm going to applaud her for that too. And next Tuesday, we are having an open informational session for anyone interested in possibly being a Board of Education candidate. We are going to have some seats up for election here in November. And if you've ever wondered, if you're out there somewhere watching this on video and you've wondered what it's like to what board service is about and what you might be getting into, this would be a good opportunity for you to come on in this building, the Booth Doyle building. And it's on the 26th, this Tuesday at 7 p.m. And President Von Oyen and I will be there to answer questions and provide you with that basic information.
And you can also go to masb.org/getonboard. That has other resources on what it means to be a school board member.
And that concludes my report.
Thank you.
Wes, let me just add a little bit on that launch process. I watched the news conference that was from Lansing yesterday. The leadership in the schools, you've got the head of Michigan Association of School Boards, which is our statewide organization, Don Wetruba. You've got the executive director of MASA, the superintendent's organization, Chris Wygant, is also a leader in that. And one of the spokesmen at the presentation was Dr. Cook Robinson, who is the superintendent of Oakland schools. So that the education community is fully behind this whole program, but linking that with the business community in particular is critical after we saw what happened with Amazon not coming to this area.
Right.
Really trying to get the business community behind improving education in the state of Michigan is absolutely critical. And this is what Don Wetruba said. He's been doing this kind of thing for 20 years now, and it's the first time he's ever seen that kind of cooperation between the school organizations and the business community. So looking forward to very good things coming out of that.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Madam Secretary, our consent agenda, please.
I move that the Board of Education approve the recommendations detailed in the consent agenda as follows. Request to approve minutes, study session of June 7, 2018. Request to approve minutes, regular meeting of June 7, 2018. Request to approve food services management contract renewal with Aramark Educational Services, LLC. Request to approve Treasury management services with Comerica Bank. Request to approve intergovernmental agreement for shared services with Oakland schools. Request to approve monthly financial reports. Request to approve disbursement reports. Request to approve bid number 1802 high school landscape with United Landscape Incorporated in the amount of $61,055.50 funded from the sinking fund. Request to approve HR actions.
Do I have support? Support from Mr. Pelletier. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up, we have a public hearing on our budget. Tina Kostiuk is going to share with
Good evening.
us. Thank you.
So once a year, we have a public hearing, which is required by law before the adoption of the original budget for next school year. Along with that are the property tax rates that I will cover in a moment. But most importantly, our budget is actually an ongoing budget look throughout the entire year. We actually start the process of mid-year revisions and final revisions in December, especially once we know the fall enrollment and the staffing. And then after mid-year revisions, we have final revisions at this time, this evening, along with using that as a basis for projecting next year and showing a long-term forecast. Our goal, administration's goal, and our discussions in cabinet focus around the board's policy on fund balance of being 15 to 20% at a minimum of our operating expenditures, and so that is our focus. And everything else we've discussed as far as the School Finance Research Collaborative and Launch Michigan especially, I really am excited about keeping those at the forefront, because funding in Michigan is what we and all schools are challenged to budget with. And the focus of all of these groups is our students. So I am very excited about all of these initiatives over the past year. All right, so going to our budget presentation. And I know Vicki will be manually updating your screens as we go. Okay, so I already told you what we're covering tonight. So without further ado, let's first take a look at where we landed this year. For this year, we have started actually our budget discussions for the final revisions and going into next year back during our April study sessions, and have had study sessions since then related to budget. This particular screen is comparing the original budget that started this school year and then goes through the mid-year revisions and then the final budget. What we are looking at and where our focus is on that last line, the fund balance as a percent of expenditures. And this year we are looking at exceeding the goal of 20% and landing at about 21.3% in our final budget. And that does include expenditures or spending over revenue of about 1.2 million, a couple of rows up from that. The next two slides take us through the changes since mid-year, because every time I come to you with a budget recommendation or revisions to the budget, I walk the trail from the last time the board approved the budget to what I am recommending that evening. So here, mid-year, we were projecting a $1.8 million spending over revenue. And as we go through 2 pages of changes, most of those changes that are outlined here relate to revenue. We don't get too excited just being conservative accountants. When I look at mid-year revisions, I may see a trend in certain local revenue and how it's coming in, but until I see it, I tend to hesitate and be conservative. And so I was very pleased to see a lot of these changes that are outlined here. Staff compensation net, while we had savings and we also had some spending, the change net all told for general fund staff were only about over $103,000, but to the good. And some of that relates to the new system, and we're using the budgeting module, and we learned that some of the less than 12-month employees were actually budgeted as 12-month employees, so there was a little bit of savings there. That was really the predominant driver for having a better picture here. And then the last item related to the retirement system, we actually are receiving some funding we get to keep. It's not an in and an out, and so that was a significant pickup. On the next page are things going the other way, making the impact worse, but really overall they are quite small. Some of these things are non-recurring, and they are accounted for when I project the following year. So that's what leads us to the final budget of about 1.2 million of spending over revenue. On the next few slides, I have pie charts, just reminding us on the revenue side for this year, our revenue by source, state and local revenue are the majority of our revenue. Included in the state and local revenue is our foundation allowance, along with a lot of those other smaller sources that you saw. So when I go to the next pie chart, I take the revenue by source and I actually break it down to what foundation allowance is, the per pupil amount that each year, as we watch the state go through its budget process, really starting in January to now, what is that amount that we, Bloomfield, are going to be allowed to receive per pupil? And 76 or 3/4 of our budget is comprised of that amount that Lansing decides through their process. And when we break that down into a state and local portion, we can't forget that through the generosity and support of our community, we have property taxes that are levied, and our hold harmless is included in that, as well as on commercial property, we have a local portion here, and it's about a 50-50 mix between the local and the state. So of our rounded 12,000 plus that we receive per pupil, about half of it is coming through locally through property taxes, and about half of that is through the state. Next page takes a look at the spending side. On the spending side, as we would expect, the majority of our costs are staff. So about 84% in total for salaries and benefits. Half of that just purely on salaries, which is about 78 million. And then everything else is pretty small. I will point out, because we do contract out some of our staff, not only substitutes for many years now, but custodial services, for instance, that the green portion that says 7% purchase services would include contracted staff.
And that has been growing over the last few years?
Yes, if I go back to the year before we did that, yes. And then it's all a matter of math when you look at the percent of the total, because our total expenditures continue to change. On the, as far as the law, we are required to adopt a budget and make revisions as needed for the general fund as well as all of our special revenue funds. So this slide captures the total of the special revenue funds, which includes our center program, our International Academy. Both of those are self-sustaining tuition-based programs. Just a reminder, International Academy is a consortium of districts, and then our center program is a countywide center program for our special education students, the largest portion of which is the Wing Lake building, and that's tuition-based as well. Then we have our Recreation Community Services Fund, our Food Services Fund, and our Co-Curricular Endowment Fund. I show these in total, but I also need to mention for anyone listening, there's a very detailed budget package that is part of the agenda and available online, and it'll also be available through the finance web pages as well once everything is approved. So that was this year. That's close to being done. Next week is the last week of June. I can't believe that, or that school's out. Now we turn to next year. The property tax millage rates, first page. So in summary, the principal residence, which we often refer to as homestead or our hold harmless operating millage, is 7.4366. The asterisk reflects the fact that we actually levy these rates half for the July 1st bill that'll be coming to all of you soon, and then the other half is in December. We levy the July 1st bill based on the latest taxable value and enrollment projections we have. And we have the opportunity to look at it again in September, which I do, and if there are any changes in enrollment or taxable value, usually is updated through the Treasury website, I need to recalculate that, figure out what the rate is, back out what was levied July 1, and that's what's levied December 1. So I thought that little note might help because over time, periodically I get a phone call and questions about how that works when it's not the exact same amount on the bill for December 1st. So that's how it works. Non-principal residents, we often refer to as non-homestead, is the old language, and that's the 18 mills on all of our businesses, basically. All classifications of property pay the debt service, and that relates to the high school bond. So when taxpayers approved that are issuing those bonds, they approved us levying the rate needed to pay the upcoming principal and interest payments. That actually went down because the math is taxable value times millage rate is what we receive. And with our taxable values, I think many residents are very happy to see their equalized value going up. The taxable value is capped on how fast it goes up, but it's going up as well, which allowed us to reduce that bonded debt service rate from 0.95 to 0.90. The sinking fund that's listed there is exactly what voters approved. We asked for a replacement so we could take advantage of the new laws this summer, both on security and technology. So that 0.7165 should look very familiar to anyone that saw that on the ballot this past May. Thank you to everyone for passing that. And then the last one is actually a very small group of properties classified as commercial personal property, and that's the rate for that. Okay, moving on to assumptions. There are many, many things that are unknown at this point in time and will still be unknown come July 1st. But we need to do our best utilizing whatever resources we have, and us colleagues in Oakland County as well as across the state often exchange information through listservs on what we might think is happening. From a revenue standpoint, we're very grateful that the state's budget process ends at a point where we can actually utilize some very comfortable numbers. So that $120 per pupil is what we're getting next year. That's the largest increase we've seen in a long, long time. I don't remember what year I'd have to go back to see that. And it is a 2x formula, which means that districts that are lowest funded receive twice that amount per pupil. And in subsequent years, I'm very conservative. Although this was great news now, you never know where some of that school aid fund money might be repurposed, as it has in the past. So I've significantly reduced that in future years when you see the forecast in a minute. The expenditures, salary and wages, most of that is bargained, or we have to make a reasonable assumption based on history and where we're at. None of our forecast includes a freeze, so that's important, because when we had years that weren't looking so good, sometimes we had to talk about some of that. Retirement rate is in there. Budget balancing actions, the last bullet point is very important. Budget balancing actions are an ongoing process, especially through cabinet and teams that cabinet oversees. And we focus most on the following year, the following 2 years, and then the numbers certainly drop off because it's really difficult to gain a lot of clarity around those last two. And we focus mostly on the first two. So if we look back a few years, next year wouldn't have such a big number. But we do get there. I'm actually very impressed and very humbled to be part of such a great team that every year looks at budget balancing actions, because that's one of a three-legged stool. We look at the amount we're going to receive per pupil and hope it increases, and it is 120. We look at enrollment, which we're very fortunate to have had an upward trend, and I know we're going to hear about that projection shortly. And then we look at budget balancing actions. So those three components are really key to us looking at the fund balance policy of the board and making sure we stay in the next couple of years as close to the 20% as possible. And then those last couple of years, we'll get closer to 15%. It's a product of conservative. I have to decide where I'm comfortable. So, yes, sir.
You state that the $120 is the largest foundation allowance that we've gotten in many years. And I've heard that in the press quite a bit. Have to realize that the $120 is still just about 1% increase. So, and our costs go up by more than 1% a year. 1% is not the inflation rate. Inflation rate is probably around 2 to 3%. So that it really requires us to continuing to do these budget balancing actions. And let's kind of say what budget balancing actions are. Very often they're cuts. We don't like to say that, but if our costs are rising greater than the revenue we're getting from the state every year, we have to continue to do budget balancing actions to keep within that fund balance guideline that the board has given you.
Yes, that's an excellent point. And actually, you're reading my mind because we have the CPI chart later on, too.
Very good.
Good point. Thank you, Howard.
Which is why that school finance research collaborative work is so important for this district.
Yes, and why our long-term forecasts typically look worse and worse as the year goes on, because I know costs will go up at a much faster rate than what I can count on revenues increasing. So the general fund, to sum it up for next year, it starts out with the fund balance projected at the end of this year. Adding in revenues, subtracting out expenditures, we're looking at spending over revenue under $1 million and landing our fund balance at about 18.7, which is still 20%. You'll see that in a chart in a moment. I forgot to put that on the slide. For the special revenue funds in total, they remain pretty consistent. Again, the same funds I mentioned before, and we're looking at just a little bit of spending over revenue, landing at about $6 million combined. I have a copy of the fund balance policy, and I know all of the board members are very familiar with it, with the 20% and not going below 15. So with that, looking at the long-term forecast, this picture actually includes last year's audited numbers, which landed, the very last line highlighted in yellow is 24.1%. And this year, landing at about 21.3, and then next year at 20.1%. The other years you're seeing for the first time, except the study session was very close. There were some minor changes back and forth. But as I indicated, the last couple of years have the least amount of clarity, the most amount of conservatism, and gets closer to that 15% floor. And as Howard pointed out, the expenditures are increasing at a faster clip overall, which then increases the spending over revenue. I have just a couple of more slides that include many years of history. This one is looking at our revenue and expenditures by fiscal year. Most of the years we will see, as we are challenged with complying with the policy, looking at how much we are or are not going to get from the state, where our enrollment is, where oftentimes our spending does exceed our revenue. And then there were years where our revenue exceeded our expenditures. So we can see that we just keep playing that, maneuvering through as best we can with that three-legged stool, and some of that is not within our control and some of it is. So to the extent that it is, I know there's a significant amount of effort to keep us financially sound, and our auditors have had really good reports for us. In fact, they're going to be starting their audit next week. And then this is the CPI chart that I mentioned. So I have this in a table form too, and I've had some comments that it's actually nice to see in these bars. So let me explain what the bars are, because it certainly is a busy chart. The far left cluster is 2008-09. The far right is next school year. When I look at the very first bar in every cluster that's a bright green, that's the CPI cumulative change since Proposal A went into effect. So when we look at next year, that bright green bar at the very top, it says 70%. And then the blue, which shoots much higher than the bright green bar, that's actually where the minimum foundation districts have been. And of course, the goal was to reduce that gap, so their increases exceeded the cumulative CPI for all of these years. And you're not seeing all of the years because we wouldn't be able to read this if I went back that far. So the last bar in the chart, the lowest one, is purple. Reminded me of the high school, so that's usually what I choose. And you can see how our cost, or overall the amount compared to CPI that we've been receiving, is far, far and away from inflation. It really reduces our purchasing power. It challenges us more to do what we need to do so we can keep our eye on our students and their success. So this year, 16% is the purple bar, and the CPI is 66%. Next year, I think it's about 17%. It goes up one, likely because we're getting that big 120, or as you put it, it's only 1%, compared to where CPI is at 70%. There's a lot going on in this bar chart, but colors are nice. So, with that, later on this evening, both individually, we have the final budget revisions recommendation before you under board business, as well as the original budget, the opening budget for next year. And any other questions, I'm happy to address them. I know we've had a lot of discussion over the months.
So this is a public hearing. Do we have any public out there who have any questions for Tina at this time? We do have residents of the community in the room. No questions from the community. Any board questions? Thank you very much, Tina.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, we have our enrollment projection report, and we have Paul Wills from Plant Moran Cressa, who's going to lead us through that. Dr. Grasser, do you want to have any comments before we start, or?
Just how much I appreciate Tina's work. And how much I appreciate the work also that Plant Moran Cressa has done for us these several years, putting together these reports, the continuity of having these reports year after year done with such great detail, as you will see. is a real asset to the district. And so thank you, Mr. Wills, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Glass and President Van Ooyen and board members. Good evening. This actually is our 9th year providing demographics and enrollment projections for the Bloomfield Hills schools. Real quickly, for those that may not be familiarized, we are recognized by the Department of Treasury to actually provide enrollment projections for school districts. We do a lot of other plethora of activities, but we're really here to focus more on that enrollment projections going forward. Who we do it for? We do enrollment projections for about 60 districts and several ISDs across the state of Michigan. So how do we do the demographic enrollment projections? It's usually good to kind of take a step back and really explain what's happening globally in the United States, what's happening in the state of Michigan, even right here in Oakland County, then ultimately what's happening in the Bloomfield Hills schools. On the upper left, this is an article from the Pew Research, who's been tracking live births since 1920. Congratulations, 2016 was an all-time low for fertility in terms of 62 births per 1,000. You'll see a direct relation to that in the middle state of Michigan. So congratulations, anyone born in 1958, you're at the very top peak of that mountain. The last major, I'll call it major growth, was in 2000, which you'll see here on the upper right-hand side, which is the state of Michigan and also Oakland County. We'll blow up that slide here a little bit because there is some direct impact as it relates to Bloomfield Hills schools. So again, this is just what's happening kind of globally across the United States, Michigan, and then the county itself. So Plainmoor and Cressa, we do a lot of demographic searches for large corporations, nonprofits, and school districts. You're usually familiarized with a 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile radius, and you're able to look at the demographic report. Back in 1999-2000, we realized we could actually draw school districts' boundaries and give you that exact same information that large corporations would look at to place a call center or, let's say, manufacturing plant or a business services. We do look at the cohort survival forms produced by the district. Again, there's the fall count and also the spring count. For those that you may not be familiar, that is how the school districts actually get their funding. You may pay local taxes and you think it all goes directly to the schools. It actually is based on the number of students that are found on the count days in the fall and both in the spring. We also take a look at what's happening in Oakland County and also the state of Michigan. So we're going to kind of take a look at some of those data points here. This is that slide that we showed earlier. So congratulations to those seniors that just graduated. Most of you were born in 2000. My son was born in 2000, so he's one of those 16,235 individuals that were born in Oakland County that year. If you move to the far right, it was just over 13,600 births in 2016. The 2017 audit information is still being accumulated by the Department of Health and Services. But if you take a look, that's roughly 2,350 kids every year over the last 10 years. So you take a look at what's happening in the county, and you see this decreased birth rate. Now the good news is there's actually people moving into different districts in different areas of Oakland County, which is offsetting some of those declining live births. So let's take a look at some of those numbers as we look at it. So this is one of our demographic pages that we take a look at. So that first column you'll see is the primary area, Bloomfield Hills. In that black polygon that you looked at, there's 11,365 families. There's a total number of households of 15,571. The average household size is 2.49 individuals. Median household size is 2.7. Most importantly, the median age of householder is 60.5. For those districts that are experiencing significant growth, i.e. South Lyon and Brighton and others, that number is in the high 30s and low 40s. We take a look at the number of households with actual school-aged children, which of those total households, 33.1%. The number of those households that have K-12, because remember, school age is PK through 25, or 26 actually, that's 1.42 kids per household per housing unit. So again, the total number of, I'll call it pillows, as we call them, is 0.33. The average meeting year moving into the district is 2003. The next one we look at is how many of those are actually enrolled in a PK-12 program within that black polygon. So you see that number of 7,312. That last year, that number was 7,424. So we're seeing a decrease of the number of school-age children that are PK3, and we have some charts in subsequent pages that will kind of outline that. The next is we break it down by pre-primary and both between public and private. So you'll see here that 43.5% are enrolled in a public pre-primary, i.e. a blooming program. More importantly is that 56.5%. So again, if you look at how to attract students potentially into the district, because the numbers that we'll show you here is once kids come to Bloomfield Hills schools, they typically stay all the way through 12th grade. The enrolled in K-12 is 76.68. Last year, that number was just slightly higher, so there was about a 0.5% increase of those choosing a private education versus the public schools. The state average is roughly 10.64%, and in Oakland County, it's 13.7% of that private to public going forward. The next slide is we take a look at that breakdown of the 0 to 5 because that's your feeder systems into the kindergarten programs. Then we break it into the next 6 to 11-year-olds, the 12 to 17-year-olds, and then the 18 to 24-year-olds. So on the right-hand side, you'll see there's a 1.1% decrease. Again, that's a direct correlation of the declining birth rate, but we're also keeping track of those individuals moving into the district. About a 0.2% decrease at the elementary level, a 2.1% at the middle school and high school level. And sorry for those parents that thought your kids were going off to college. There's a 1.1% increase of those 18 to 24-year-olds staying in that district after graduation. Yes. This chart really just shows that exact same information. And remember, this is the total age groups within the boundary. So this is not just Bloomfield Hills schools. This would be that 23-24% that are also choosing private education. Also, students that may be in the district that go, let's say, out of the district to other public entities. But you'll see the blue diamond at the very bottom. That is the trend for the 0 to 5s, which almost has a direct correlation to those live births that we saw. The 12 to 17-year-olds, if you had any middle school principals here, they'll say, yes, that is so true. As you look at your population of that 6th, 7th, 8th grade that's moving in. And then the 19, or the red squares is your current elementary going into middle school. And if you're a district that was very stable with enrollment, you'd want those lines to be as closely as possible. When you have a large difference between, let's say, the 17-16 on the far right and the 34-62 up in the top, the question is, can you have that many more students move into the district? Because we know it's not going to take place through live births. So the answer for Bloomfield, luckily, is yes. And so you're going to see some numbers that you'll see where you are growing with people moving into the district at that 4th, 5th, 6th grade level going forward. So again, this is just taking that same number of enrollment. This is all public schools K-12. So if you're on the right-hand side on 2022, you'll see 1996. Mr. Holler, don't worry, there's not 2,000 students, because if you take a look, about 23-24% are choosing that private, which leaves you about 1,500 students. So we know you also have some tuition-based, also some parents or students of teachers, et cetera, that really make up the high school population. So it's going to be a very steady at that level. There'll be a slight increase at the middle school levels and then ultimately at the elementary school level. But again, I kind of look at that PK private of saying, what is our opportunity or capture potential? There's about 310 PK programs that you would look at potentially for some long-term strategic planning. So again, we take a look not just at live birth rates. We don't take a look at your straight cohort survivals. We take a look at what's happening with the district. So again, we look at the number of people that are moving into the district, the people that are moving out of the district, the number of households that are available to be filled. We get our information from Nielsen Claritas. So if you watch TV, swipe your card at Kroger, gas station, we're buying all that information really for our corporate clients, but we're able to share that with the school district as it relates to families, students, et cetera. And ultimately, we're here to do the report. So we're kind of at the tail end of this graph here. So I want to shift gears a little bit. And what we're going to show you in the next set of slides is actually what's called your full-time equivalency, or FTE, which dovetails very nicely to Ms. Kostiuk's presentation. When we did the master property planning, we actually looked at headcount. So some numbers that you see from this presentation, let's say from 2 years ago, are going to be different because this is all students that your foundation allowance is based on. So it's more of a budgeting aspect, and we thought it would be appropriate with the budget discussions and season we have tonight. So we start in the upper left-hand side. You'll see start here. So that 2006 birth year, there was 14,367 births, of which your incoming kindergarten class of 304 kids resulted in a 2.11% capture rate of those births. Does everyone see that? Mm-hmm. So now we're going to slide to the right to the middle, so that thick black line with the red highlights. Everything to the left of that is your historical data. So in 2012, the birth rate was 13,307, which is 1,000 kids less. The good news is your capture rate is actually 2.62%, so you're almost up a full half a point from where you were 6 years ago. The way the chart works is if you take a look at the next level down, you'll see that secondary red arrow. You'll see those 357 students that were in 2016-17 kindergarten class. It works on a diagonal, so you drop over one column and down one row. From kindergarten to first grade, you ended up with 360 students. at the first grade level, or roughly 100.89%. Do you all see that number? So that 0.89% represents that growth from the previous year. So when you tally all that up, there's actually 13 sections of grades from K all the way through 12. If you went right down that thick black line of historical data, over this past year, 10 out of those 13, while they're positive numbers, were less than the previous years. And so again, this is just some of those data points of what's happening at some of those grades. So a good example is when you start seeing a 104.29%, 103.92, you're actually capturing 3 to 4% from grade to grade over the long period of time. The good news is if you take a look at that 9th to 10th grade, you're picking up 6-7%, which is phenomenal from the 9th to 10th grade. And again, that's some of that movement that we see into the district. So at the very bottom of the page, your K-12 numbers of 5,401, that's your FTE number. Mr. Ford, you asked, what are we here for today? I said, well, we're here to see how good we did. So we're roughly within less than 1% of accuracy from last year. So again, from a budgeting level, it's a level of comfort, I think, as Ms. Kostiuk's looking at projecting out next year. And it is difficult because you're not sure what the state's going to get, who's going to show up in October for the fall count, et cetera. But at the end of the day, we're looking at about a 1 to 1.5% growth over the next 5 years. So you're seeing a slight uptick in overall enrollment with FTE, which is great. Because again, as I think as Trustee Barron mentioned, is expenses will still go up. And so the only way is to grow that population, which we think you're going to do quite successfully. The next slide, again, it looks a lot, I'd say, better. But that's that 1% to 2% growth. So from an FTE equivalency standpoint, about 5,800 students the next 5 years going forward. And again, that's just based on those number of students that are moving into the district, more capture rate of those live births. And as we showed, that live birth is actually going up. But we just don't think it's going to be at that level where we were in 2000 going forward. So with that, I'll turn it back over to, my last slide, forgot. My takeaways. So this is kind of a snapshot in time. So in that black boundary, the total population is actually going up. As we mentioned, it's traditionally at that older population. So again, those with families, the median age is up to 59.1. The number of families, again, that's basically birth through 26, is still going up. But if you take a look at that population, again, there's roughly 1,735 0 to 5s, again, that's your feeder pattern for the next 5 years. You look at those 3,500 that are going out the door. So again, that's that question of hopefully the economy keeps up, hopefully the interest rates stay low, that people are able to transition those homes. But at the end of the day, again, we're roughly that 98% accuracy going forward. So with that, I'll turn back over to the board for any questions.
Yes, Paul.
First of all, thank you very much for putting this
Welcome.
together. I have a question. I don't know if you've done this for other districts, but it's obviously most prevalent here. Have you broken down the 23% as to the reasons why they're electing to go private?
So actually, one benefit we have over the last 9 years is looking at that historical data. At the low point, it was really in 2008-9 when the economy was really unfortunate for a lot of people. You saw you were down about 22%. It's actually been as high as 24.5% in 2006. So again, yourselves, Birmingham, and others are kind of in that mid to low 20s range. Some of it's legacy, some of it's prestige. Some of actually these students don't even go to school in Michigan. So we've done some other work with some high net worth districts that you'll find kids on the East Coast, West Coast, international. But again, for Bloomfield, you've always been around that 22 to 24%. Have we dug down into that? One of the things we do ask districts if they have like transitions from, let's say, a 4th, 5th grade or even 8th to 9th grade is those exit surveys. So most of the times you have to send those transfer scripts. You could ask questions of why, where, how, without being too intrusive. But it's a lot of great data. But again, historically, Bloomfield's always been that 22 to 24% range.
Paul, we've looked at that over the years, and as Paul Wills just said, it's both legacy, prestige, and also religion. So I think I don't know the priorities between those three, but and it's been pretty stable between the 22 to 25%, plus or minus.
So it's interesting. There's others that we work with throughout the state of Michigan, and their numbers are significantly less. And the reason being is obviously you have more competition with the private schools. I mean, there's probably 7 or 8. I don't even say they're in your neighborhood because some of these are actually in downtown Detroit where you'll see buses going up and down Woodward with 150 kids. So it's, again, I think to Mr. Barron's point, it's probably more of the religious aspect of it, along with the prestige. But I think from a programming standpoint, I think, Bloomfield is still the destination district. I mean, it's based on your tuition, number of tuition students you have that come into the district, and even just seeing that increase from that 9th to 10th grade where you see a 5, 6, 7% increase, it's pretty impressive.
If you can get a private school education at a public school and not have to pay tuition, we have a competitive advantage that way.
Mr. Ford.
Paul, do you have a slide? Do you have a slide that shows, you said you've been doing this for us for 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
Have you done a study to show, here's what we predicted, here's where we ended up, here's what we predicted, here's where we ended up, just so we can see what the degree of accuracy has been over time?
Sure, I can work with the administration and provide that back to the board as a follow-up.
Okay, I'd find that interesting, just.
Sure.
Mr. Pelletier.
In the follow-on to Paul's question, do we know a breakdown, or is there a breakdown of that 23% in terms of the grades?
We do. So that's kind of another part of our details. So right now we're also working with the district more on that head count piece. So as you start looking at updating your strategic plan, is what's that happening at the elementary level? Is that trend continue at the middle school and high school level? So we're still working on that. So working with the administration and the pupil enrollment offices, we'll probably have that next month or two, I would think, in terms of that breakdown of elementary, middle, and high school levels by the private sector. So.
Other questions for Paul? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Great evening.
Will you be making that presentation available to us?
I'd probably defer to the administration team to see how it kind of interacts with the overall strategic plan. I think that's something pretty easy to do. So, but yes, absolutely, we'd love.
Paul, you were saying that the enrollment looks like it's growing over the next 4 or 5 years?
About
And
1
you-
to 2%.
Yeah, and you said that that's a revenue opportunity. You have to also understand that there are costs that go along with it, because as you get higher enrollment, you have higher costs also.
Correct. And again, just from a ease of comfort level, we don't see, again, full buildings and classrooms across, that you're going to be building new facilities. But again, looking at academic programming, how that dovetails into that changing enrollment, that'd be important. So, all right. Thanks again.
Thank you. Okay, next up, we have a presentation on 11th and 12th grade programming update.
While Mr. Hallerth is making his way up, just want to remind everyone that this is part of the ongoing high school development work of learning communities that started with grades 9 and 10 and has continued as the high school has settled into its 3rd year now in its new space. And Mr. Hallerth is going to update you.
Thank you, Superintendent Glass. And I was last in BIC back in February, which gave you a little bit of an update on the 11 and 12 work. And I'm proud to report that we've done a lot of really good work since then. And so I will take you through the work that we have done. One of the things that we're most proud of, every department has a member represented on this 11 and 12 design committee. A little historical information, as you know, when we opened the new building, our focus was on 9 and 10 learning communities. And now we're turning our attention to imagining and innovating and looking at what we can do for 11 and 12. And the good news is, listening to Paul Wills, the enrollment 9 and 10 is up. So we hope to keep it that way, and hopefully that's part of the experiences we've been able to create. In terms of the 11 and 12 work, just a little bit of the rationale for this work is we're looking at designing stuff that is going to be innovative and unique for students. And obviously to look at what students are most interested in and help design pathways for them. And then really the committee of administrators and teachers really were centered around challenging ourselves to learn about innovation around us. And you'll see in a couple of slides, we went down to Detroit, looked at what current business models are, included Quicken Loans and a building tour of Detroit, and it was really eye-opening to see the workplaces that and the collaboration that is going on in the workplace and the skills that students are going to need. So it helped us reimagine what the future could look like. And then also to study ways that we can remove parameters. We have a lot of flexibility now, and the state of Michigan has helped us with that, and how we deliver content, how we deliver credits to students. And so not to be stuck in an old paradigm, but to really start to dream a little bit. And then to examine our current system to find ways to build a structure that will honor student choice, because that is at the heart of what our programming, comprehensive programming, is all about, is to allow students to help design their own future. So that was the rationale that we looked at. The goals of the team collectively, we were all committed each other to be mindful and inquisitive, continue to generate questions throughout the process, do as much research as we can, look at what others are doing around us, nationally, internationally, and then to gather student input as part of the process. What do our students want to see? A lot of that was process-oriented activities. We started in early spring with a retreat at Kirk in the Hills, and thank Reverend Phillips and his staff for hosting us in their rooms over there. And then we were down, I want to thank Paul Wills, but he left from Plant Moran. They hosted us down in Detroit and spent the day, as I mentioned a little while ago, working down there and seeing different workspaces. And then finally, we were out at the farm. Thank you, Alan, for lending that. That was a great facility. So we were able to get off campus and start to dream and start to reimagine. One of the things that our design focus was really developed from a series of questions of inquiry. As I mentioned, designing learning experiences that would allow for student choice and students to follow their passion. So whether it was in STEM, whether it was in biology, whether it was in humanities, whatever it might be, that to challenge ourselves to look at those different opportunities. Also to create a community that allows students to take ownership and responsibility. So how do we design that where students are really at the center of that design element? Third, to design learning for real, authentic audiences, whether that be our community, whether that be their peers, whatever that condition could be. And number four, to design an experience that will allow students to name, own, and understand the responsibility to give back. And so there was a community connection with that. And those learning experiences, obviously, in number five, would allow that to maintain those through authentic connections. When we look at, as we start to move forward, and I'll show you the timeline in just a second, does the program contain elements of student voice and choice? So as we look to design possibilities for grades 11 and 12, is student voice and choice embedded in that? And does the program develop life skills needed for success in school and career? Because these are skills not only important for the last 2 years of high school, but hopefully skills that will last them a lifetime and help support their career interests. And number three, does it connect to the real world and authentic experiences? And then number four, does the program have connection to the community? And finally, are there clear expectations and guidelines for what those outcomes will be? So the journey so far, where we are currently, is we started looking this past year at our current practices and parameters. We started then doing our research and our own learning. Part of that included looking at what are the skills students are going to need for the 21st century. We also talked a lot and learned a lot about the adolescent brain and learning, and then the shift in pedagogy that's coming at the university level too as well. We did a number of different surveys, and we conducted a student focus group in terms of what experiences would students like to see as we move forward with 11 and 12 design. Part of that survey data included their experiences that they had in 10th grade and how many of those experiences would they want to keep, or those design elements would they want to keep for 11 and 12. And then, as you saw, as I shared with you, to develop questions of inquiry that is going to help us drive the design and set the parameters for what we develop in the future. And as I shared with you also, the 5 program considerations. So next steps, where are we in the process? We are ready in August and September to start doing some site visits to other unique programs, other authentic programs that meet the program considerations. And we're going to take our parameters with us as we evaluate what others are doing out there. And as you know, there's some school districts across the country that are doing some pretty innovative programming with 11th and 12th. Brainstorm come up and start to develop ideas. In October, we want to come back to you with what some of those ideas are going to be. And then do another board presentation on our findings from our site visits and what teachers are starting to explore, and then look at, in November, what the course sequence changes might be and how that might affect our scheduling and the opportunities for students, because we want to maintain choice as an embedded element of our design. And then the exciting thing in January of 2019 is to start to roll out 1 or 2 potential pathways and programs. And so we're excited about that. And hopefully, I know the group, the committee is very excited about it too as well. So with that, the other thing I wanted to mention too, I shared with you digitally, because you might get questions about this work. I've condensed all of this into an FAQ that I sent to all of you digitally. So as you get questions, hopefully that will answer those questions for any community members or families that might have it too, or bring questions to you too as well. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Ford.
Thank you, Madam President. Charlie, in a previous slide, one of the things that you said is you wanted to make sure that the learners were experiencing authentic connections. One of those connections is connections to their cohort of fellow students. Is that correct?
Yes, and learning with a cohort of fellow students that might have similar interests or be in a program that is authentic in design and has an embedded element of collaboration with a similar student group and student interest.
Okay, yeah, because one of the things I really appreciate about what we're doing at the 9 and 10 level is we do have these learning communities, and they do feel at least a connection, the students do, to a certain cohort of students and a certain cohort of teachers. And we don't want any of them to feel isolated. I was just reading some of the latest research on depression and stuff like that. One of the leading contributors is this feeling of isolation. And with everything that our students are dealing with, it's real easy to be drawn into depression and that kind of thing. So I think this idea of creating these authentic connections with their fellow students and teachers, and the counselors and everybody else is really important. So that's good to see.
And I think if you read some of the feedback that the students gave us, they mentioned that as one of the elements they really liked about the LC design.
Mr. Pelletier? I thought you had a question. Howard?
Reading through some of the design considerations, talks about connecting to the real world, authentic experiences, connections with the community. There has been a lot of discussion over the last year or so related to CTE and the Marshall Plan that just had about $100 million put into the school aid budget this year. Also, when President Van Ooyen and I were down in Washington, D.C. a few years ago, we had exposure to some internship programs that other countries have. Not internships, apprenticeship programs. So with that kind of as a trend in the nation, how is what you're talking about here kind of connecting up with some of these trends?
And I think those authentic experiences and those community connections are going to be important, and So it's nice to see that the state of Michigan also feels the same way our committee does as we look at the work and how can we tie that to real-world experiences. Right now, as you know, we have multiple sections this year, first year of the Capstone Internship Program. And we've had a number of community members step up, either as guest speakers, as mentors, or providing internships. So as we start to roll out these pathways, that will be a critical point in terms of being able to give students real-world experiences. And many of our students are ready to go out and do exactly that. And so, and that could be over an extended period of time. And to the credit of the state of Michigan, they've given us some flexibility in how that could look. It could be a couple hours, it could be a half day, it could be a full day experience, it could be a multi-week experience. So the good news is they've taken off the traditional parameters so students can get as much experience as they possibly can in a world of work that's ever changing.
So not only is the flexibility coming from the state, but also Ms. Kostiuk might be able to work with you in some of the grant opportunities that might be available in the budget, not necessarily for, well, maybe for 18-19, but definitely for 19-20.
Right, and you know, even in some cases where the state is outlined, there could be students could, you know, lead to internships that may be paid down the road from their experiences that they gain here. So, you know, there are a lot of options there, and it's really not only for our community to see around the state that businesses are coming to the table to help support this type of programming.
Another thing that's being talked about kind of in parallel with this is competency-based education. Does that kind of fit into this, or is that more of a broader conversation, all K-12?
No, I think, you know, as we start to evaluate some of these programs could be, for an example, project-based in design, and so it would be then we can look at competency-based, you know, achieving those core skills that we make sure students, you know, establish as they go through the program. So that's certainly not out of the elements of design.
So, because what I'm looking at is obviously we're molding what we're doing in 11th and 12th and trying to match that with what the state is doing also and trying to get a
Howard, you need to
commonality.
let other people ask some questions too. You're like in your fourth.
Oh, absolutely.
So Charlie, so we just had a graduating class, and they're going to go, you know, some will go to post-secondary education, some may go into the workforce, some may take a gap year. Is there a process sometime in the fall or maybe early spring when you're talking about surveys, to get feedback from them on what they would have hoped for that would have helped prepare them to where they are at this current moment?
One of the things that the district added, was we added a module to Naviance, and most of our parents are familiar, and that is a graduate follow-up. So that'll help us capture some of that feedback that we're looking for in terms of did they stay in their majors, did they change their majors, what were the areas of interest or things that they were ready for when they came into you know, whether it was a 4-year or 2-year institution. So we will be able to collect some of that data to help us design so that they can hopefully continue in that pathway. And to be quite honest too, they may get into a pathway in 11th and 12th grade and may learn a lot, but decide that they want to go a different direction, and maybe they learn that through that experience. And I think that's okay to acknowledge too as well. Better to find out now than later.
Absolutely. So I recall the BIC presentation you made several months ago. You did talk about areas of concentration or endorsements that students might be able to get on their diploma, or certificates that would be specific skill base that maybe they could use for towards job skills.
Yeah, and Howard alluded to it. It would be one of the options would be a competency-based model that was focused on skills and attributes and dispositions that those those students would need to attain while in that program.
Other board comments, questions for Charlie at this time?
Actually, one other point, and I don't know if it's going to be addressed. So obviously, I had a graduating senior, not at the high school, but I know feedback from him, is when you're a senior, your second semester, it's difficult to be focused. And I don't know if the capstone, if we're going to have more students try to participate in internships to try to get them more engaged, because that, I'm sure you realize, that second semester, senior year, is difficult to have students engaged. So I don't know if this is part of what you're working through to try to see how we can get more students engaged, as opposed to getting their senioritis.
And our capstone internship enrollment is up again for next year. So more students are taking advantage of that, which is great to see. So hopefully we can develop these programs so to the extent that they can be skill-specific, career-specific into certain areas, and we can help assist and guide them more to learn those skills and prerequisite skills that they're going to need, all the better. And you're right, to lead to a continued level of high engagement for them and quite honestly, a high level of their own satisfaction.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw that article. There was an article in today's Washington Post about 8 private schools in the Washington, D.C. area that had decided they were no longer going to offer AP classes, and because they wanted to be able to go in deeper into and more authentic experiences for kids, and would set themselves apart more than they thought. AP was becoming too commonplace they wanted to be more elite than that. Mr. Ford.
Yeah.
Does Capstone address those who would want to pursue a career in the trades?
Our capstone program does have a number of areas. They can design it, and we try and look for mentors and obviously programming with guest speakers around that. So it can be in engineering, it can be in certain skilled trades areas. Fortunately for us, we have the OTech campuses too that offer fabulous programming. So for those skill-based programs which lead to certifications in many cases, that has been, and our OTech enrollment is ticking up too as well, which
That's good to hear.
is great.
Good to hear. Any other questions or comments? We'll be excited to see what you guys got to come up with.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Enjoy your summer. Thank you, Charlie. Okay, we are on to general discussion. Do we have a report from the BIC meeting of June 18th?
I talked about the district improvement plan.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, so we had one agenda item, which was the district improvement plan. And Todd and his team came in and talked about, various things that they are doing in terms of putting the plan together and putting it in action. And that was basically it. So we actually, for the first time ever, we actually ended a meeting on time. So that was great. So we have a very inquisitive team. So, and your folks are very patient with us. So
Look forward to it. And any questions or comments from anybody in addition to that? I have a couple of others. So last night at the Oakland County School Board Association meeting, a couple of things. One is regarding Launch Michigan, in addition to what Dr. Glass said and what Howard said about the partnership of having business and education together, I do want to say there wasn't mention of the MEA and the AFT are very active parts of Launch Michigan as well. So we have the professional, all our teachers at the table as well. And I think I wanted to be sure that we mentioned that.
The head of the MEA did part of the presentation.
Right. I thought an interesting piece of the comments that we got from David Randalls last night regarding the state budget this year, regarding the school aid fund. 100% of community college budget is coming out of our school aid fund. One of the things that we talk about goals for when we are lobbying in Lansing, the rate of the school aid fund that was supposed to be for K-12 and how much of it is now going to higher ed. It's a huge diversion, and we think about what the limits are to what's been being spent on K-12 over recent years and the really rate on school aid fund that's gone to higher ed. It's something that we can't lose track of, and we need to remember.
Close to $1 billion.
Close to $1 billion. The other issue I wanted to bring up from last night, because we'll be seeing this come fall, the Oakland County School Board Association is, I mentioned earlier this year, has become a 501c4. And as part of the process, we're revising our bylaws, and we'll be bringing that and a new process for engagement, and we will be bringing that as a item for the board to be looking at in detail to be voted on in September. Rather than having to go to be present at the board meeting, the bylaws will be able to, so we can vote as a board, have a discussion, and then send in our vote to the association so that every board gets a voice to be at the table. So there'll be more coming regarding that in the fall.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons for this change is that the Oakland School Board Association wanted to become more politically active and be able to take policy positions. We've been mostly just a professional development organization, and this would mirror what the Michigan Association of School Boards has, and we had a whole PowerPoint presentation that some of the school board members presented to us last night, which kind of goes through, it's a multi-step process to get from where we were to where we're going to be, but it would mean that the legislative committee that President Van Ooyen and I are on will become more important, and also this, our body here will have to be voting on some of these political or policy positions.
Yes.
I watched with great interest the whole press conference. I watched it live, and I was really, really excited to see the broad spectrum of groups and organizations that were involved, whether it was the teachers, whether it was corporate, MASB, I mean, the list goes on. What wasn't clear to me is, do they have some type of leadership structure for that organization set up yet? Or it's kind of, okay, we're the first people to show up at the table, we'll figure that out later. Are they working on that right now? Do you know, is somebody the leader of Launch Michigan, or?
I don't know that I can answer that specifically, but if you go on the website, which I've just begun to explore, I
Yeah.
wasn't able to watch the press conference, but on that website, there are various tabs, and there are some areas they're still building out.
Oh, that was my impression too.
Yeah, so I think, I don't know that I can answer that, but I would assume that they have something in mind to make sure that they can have a structure to collaborate and can keep engaged. Some of you may know more.
I think this is a relatively new process. I'm on their website right now, and I don't see any organizational structure yet, but I know after the press conference, they had a 2-hour meeting. So I'm assuming that they're starting to work on some sort of organization. The one thing I do know they said is that they're planning not to have any staff.
Okay.
So this is not going to be a organization as such, at least at this point. It's more of a structure than an actual having income and therefore expenses.
Okay.
It's evolving.
Mm-hmm. But the timeline's relatively short. They're planning on actually having policy positions hopefully by September and definitely by November to give to the newly elected officials.
Yeah, and that was my concern. If everybody's responsible, then nobody's responsible. So I'm assuming they're working all that
Well,
stuff.
you've got a lot of management people there, and I'm sure they'll work it out.
I'm pretty confident of that. Anything else for general discussion? Okay, then it is time for public comment. Do we have anybody who wants to make a public comment? Hearing none, we all move on into board business. And first up, we have a request to approve the extension of our agreement with Michigan State University. Can I have a motion and get on the table, please? Jackie?
I move that the Board of Education approve an extension of the agreement with Michigan State University to continue a strategic relationship whereby Bowers School Farm and MSU Extension continue collaborating to develop opportunities for our students and surrounding communities to engage in authentic, place-based education and recreational activities. Furthermore, I move that we authorize the superintendent to finalize and execute the final details of the extension.
Extremely enthusiastic support.
Support from Mr. Ford. Yes, I have Tina and Mr. Jaros. Please share.
Good evening again. We just really want to take the opportunity to come up here. I can't believe how quickly the last couple of years have gone. And such tremendous, I can't think of one negative thing I've heard over the last couple of years. I just continue to hear, especially from those that have been to the farm over the years, how wonderful everything is looking, the progress being made. And with me, obviously, all of you know Alan Jaros, and for anyone watching on TV, I want to make sure Alan's here as the leader of all of this, part of MSU Extension. And what do you have to say?
I appreciate the support of the community and of the Board of Education, and we're looking forward to the next iteration. It has gone by quickly, and we've made a lot of headway, and the farm is such a gem and an asset for our community here. So we'll continue to build upon the sort of foundation we've laid in the partnership with Michigan State University.
And we're expanding it with a few different roles within the agreement.
Yes, so we're looking to actually expand that agreement with some new program instructor positions, and looking at how we can better support our schools. With the primary mission of academic success and connecting the teachers and the curriculum in the classroom to that outdoor environment.
Okay, any other questions?
I know that earlier in the year there was some discussion about trying to expand the agri-science program that we have in the high school. Maybe you can just go into it a little bit.
That's actually a point of pride. When we started, there was one section, as the partnership started 2 years ago, one section of agri-science for 10th and 11th graders. Going into this next school year, we will have 4 sections, 2 of agri-science and 2 veterinary science sections. And so that was, student-driven interest in just recognizing and advocating. These are students themselves advocating for how do we spend our time in the science classroom in the out of doors. Responding to the interest of the students.
Also, another cross-pollination, so to speak, is kind of comment on what the robotics program, the first program, is doing for the farm.
Sure, yeah, and actually the robotics program, we know it's highly valued here, and they've won national awards. Part of winning that award was the authentic project of building a chicken door. Sort of looking at many variables in agriculture, biotechnology is such a growing field. And what they have done is built a door that not only senses sunlight, but sound for predators, and ammonia levels in the barn, so that the chickens know at night to come inside and the door closes, thereby not needing a farmer to go out there and man that coop. So it was very exciting. Again, they won a national award for it. And it's, again, those authentic connections that Charlie just spoke about that the farm provides our community, our students.
Any other comments or questions for Tina and Alan?
I was thinking we should mention that Alan's one of our alumni, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
A graduate of Andover High School.
And actually worked at the farm as a guide for a while.
I did,
right?
yes. Yeah.
You've getting some great PR. The 48304 magazine has got a couple of big spreads on the farm that have been very nice. Pictures of cinnamon and students visiting. It's been great.
So to speak, the chickens are coming home to roost.
Yes. And actually, there was a headline I saw recently that llamas will be the new unicorns. I'm not sure what that was about there.
Your superintendent class in his denim overalls was just priceless. Work in the garden there, that's...
Yeah. And don't forget the other gardener on the board here.
I know, Jason's up to his elbows in denim. That's great. That is
All
great.
right.
So thank you.
Okay,
Well, very good.
thank you.
Well, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All in favor? We're all set? Amen. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good luck.
All right, and now on to approve the fiscal year's 17-18 final budget revisions. Do I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approve the final budget revisions for the fiscal year 2017-18 as detailed in attachments and summarized below.
I don't know that we need Tina to say anything more about this, as we've already kind of covered the ground. Any questions or at this point? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And finally, the request to approve the fiscal year 18-19 budget. Can I have a motion, please?
I'm on a roll. In accordance with the Uniform Budget Act of 1979, I move that the Board of Education adopt the attached resolution and related original budgets for fiscal year 18-19 for the General Fund and Special Revenue Fund as required by law and summarized as follows. General Fund, $92 million, $155,057. Expenditures, $93,036,382. Special Revenue Fund, $18,009,277. Expenditures out, $18,138,468.
Do I have a second, please? Support from Mr. Pelletier. Any discussion? We've discussed this earlier this evening. We've discussed it previously. I think anybody have any other comments, questions? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much. And we have one more item. We have a request to approve policy number 3435 on purchasing. And I've got Kelly Bull coming forward.
Yes, thank you. I'm requesting that the board approve the adoption of Board Policy 3435. And this is an early adoption of the board policy work that we're doing to review all of our board policy. And I'm asking for this policy to be adopted early to come into compliance with Federal Uniform Guidance and Education Department General Administrative Rules, EDGAR, and also with our Federal Uniform Guidance Act. This new policy, 3435, will replace both policies 3430 and 3440, which are related to procurement that we currently have and are not in compliance with the uniform guidance.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve policy number 3435?
Motion to approve policy 3435.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Support from Mr. Ford. Any other questions for Kelly? We've talked about this at the last board meeting. We had our first reading. Pretty straightforward. Okay, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you all very, very much. I think that does it for tonight, boys and girls. Have a wonderful summer. Enjoy. The next board will be meeting for our retreat on July 12th.
Yes.
We will talk in the meantime. Thank you.